The warning came at 0800 hours, Earth Standard Time. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee in the mess hall of the research vessel Meridian when the ship's alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed across every surface as crew members dropped their breakfast trays and ran to their stations. Jake set down his cup and walked quickly to the bridge. He had been a soldier for 12 years, but he had never heard alarms like these. They were different from the usual drill signals. These alarms meant something big was happening. "Captain Morrison, report to the bridge immediately," came the voice over the ship's communication system. Jake broke into a run. The corridors were filled with scientists and technicians, all looking scared and confused. When Jake reached the bridge, he saw Captain Lisa Carter standing at the main display screen. Her face was pale, and her hands were shaking slightly. Jake had known Lisa for 5 years, and he had never seen her look so frightened. "Jake, you need to see this," Lisa said without turning around. "We just received a transmission from Earth Defense Command. Look." The main screen showed space around Earth. Everything looked normal at first, but then Jake saw them. Massive ships were appearing out of nowhere, dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The ships were huge, each one at least 3 times the size of Earth's largest battleships. "How many?" Jake asked. 57 confirmed vessels," reported Lieutenant Steve Parker from the communications station. "More are still arriving." Jake watched as the alien fleet took position around Earth. The ships were dark and angular, with strange symbols glowing along their hulls. They moved with precision that spoke of military discipline and advanced technology. "Any communication from them?" Jake asked. "That's coming now," Steve replied. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Every radio, television, and communication device on Earth is receiving this message." The screen changed to show a creature that made Jake's blood run cold. It stood 8 feet tall, covered in dark scales that seemed to absorb light. Its eyes were yellow and cold, like a snake's eyes. Sharp teeth filled its mouth, and claws extended from its fingers. When it spoke, its voice was deep and harsh. "People of Earth," the creature said in perfect English, "I am War Master Kethter of the Vorthic Empire. Your world now belongs to us. We have conquered 300 worlds across this galaxy. Your species will submit to our rule, or you will be destroyed." Jake felt his stomach drop. Earth had always known that other intelligent life existed in the galaxy, but they had never made contact. Now their first contact was with conquerors. "However," Kefter continued, "we follow the ancient laws of conquest. We offer you the trial of champions. Send us your strongest warrior to face me in single combat. If your champion wins, we will leave your world in peace. If your champion loses, your people will serve the Vorthek Empire forever." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in complete silence. Jake looked around at his crew members. They were all staring at the screen with expressions of shock and fear. "This can't be happening," whispered Dr. Maria Santos, the ship's science officer. "We're not ready for something like this." Jake walked to the communication station. "Steve, get me a direct line to Earth Defense Command. I need to speak with Admiral Nelson immediately." While Steve worked to establish the connection, Jake studied the alien ships on the screen. They were positioned in a perfect sphere around Earth, blocking all escape routes. These were not explorers or traders. These were professional soldiers who had done this many times before. "Connection established, Captain," Steve reported. Admiral Kate Nelson's face appeared on the screen. She was a tough woman in her 50s who had led Earth's military forces for the past decade. Right now, she looked exhausted and worried. "Jake, thank God you're out there," she said. "We need every ship we can get, but I'm not sure it will matter. Our weapons can't even scratch their shields." "What do we know about them?" Jake asked. "Not much," Nelson replied. "They call themselves the Vorthik. According to their transmission, they've been conquering worlds for centuries. They always offer this trial by combat before they attack. It's some kind of ritual they follow. Has anyone ever beaten them? Nelson shook her head. From what we can tell, no. They choose the trial because they always win. It's a way to break the spirit of the people they conquer. Once their champion defeats our best warrior, resistance becomes hopeless. Jake thought about this. The Vorthek had conquered 300 worlds. That meant they had fought 300 different species and won every single time. They were clearly the galaxy's apex predators. Who are we sending? Jake asked. That's the problem, Nelson said. We've been debating this for hours. Do we send our strongest soldier, our best fighter, our smartest tactical officer? We don't even know what kind of combat they're talking about. Jake looked at the alien ships again. Something about this situation felt wrong to him. These creatures were clearly superior to humans in every way. They had better technology, bigger ships, and they had never lost a battle. So why offer the trial at all? Why not just attack and conquer Earth like they could easily do? Admiral, Jake said slowly, I think they offer the trial because they enjoy it. This isn't about being fair or following laws. This is about showing off their power. They want to prove they're the strongest creatures in the galaxy. That's what I'm afraid of, Nelson replied. We've run simulations with our best fighters. None of them have a realistic chance against something like that, War Master. Jake made a decision that would change everything. Admiral, I volunteer. The bridge went completely silent. Everyone stared at Jake with expressions of disbelief. Jake, no, Lisa said. You're not a combat specialist. You're a good soldier, but you're not our strongest fighter. That's exactly why I should go, Jake replied. They're expecting us to send our biggest, strongest warrior. They've beaten every species champion for centuries. They know how to fight strong opponents. Admiral Nelson looked confused. I don't understand your logic, Captain. Jake pointed at the screen showing the Vorthik ships. Look at those vessels. They're positioned perfectly, they move with precision, and they've never lost a battle. These creatures are professional warriors. They've seen every kind of fighter the galaxy has to offer. So? Nelson asked. So they've never fought a human, Jake said. They don't know what makes us different. They're expecting someone like them, someone who fights with strength and aggression. They're not expecting someone who thinks differently. Lisa, step forward. Jake, this is suicide. That creature is twice your size and has weapons we've never seen before. Maybe, Jake said, but I've been studying their message. Did you notice how Kethter spoke? He was confident, almost bored. He's done this so many times that it's become routine for him. He's not expecting a real fight. Admiral Nelson was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. Captain Morrison, are you absolutely sure about this? Once you accept the challenge, there's no going back. The trial will be broadcast across the galaxy. If you lose, Earth becomes a slave world. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew members. These were good people, scientists and explorers who had dedicated their lives to learning about the universe. They didn't deserve to be enslaved by alien conquerors. I'm sure, Jake said. But I'll need time to prepare, and I'll need help from Dr. Santos. If I'm going to fight this thing, I need to understand everything about their species. You have 48 hours, Nelson said. That's how long they're giving us to choose. Our champion, Jake, the entire world is counting on you. The transmission ended, leaving Jake alone with his crew. He looked at the alien ships one more time, then turned to face his team. All right, everyone, he said. We have work to do. War Master Kefter stood in his private chambers aboard the flagship Deathbringer, watching recordings of human combat. The footage showed soldiers from various Earth conflicts, and Kefter found himself growing more amused with each passing minute. These creatures were pathetic. They were small, weak, and slow compared to every other species the Vorthek had conquered. The humans used primitive weapons and relied on technology instead of their own natural abilities. They had no claws, no natural armor, no enhanced strength. They were barely worth the effort of conquest. "War Master," came a voice from behind him. Kefter turned to see Sub-Commander Vexahan, his second in command. "The humans have chosen their champion, already?" Kefter clicked his tongue against his teeth, a sign of amusement among his people. "I expected them to take longer to find someone brave enough to die for their world." Vexahan activated a holographic display showing Jake Morrison's military record. His name is Jake Morrison. He is a captain in their defense forces, age 32, 12 years of military service. Cuthter studied the image of the human. Jake was average height for his species, with brown hair and dark eyes. He looked unremarkable in every way. "This is their champion? He looks like he would break if I touched him." "The humans have stronger warriors," Vexahan reported. "We intercepted their communications." They debated sending several other candidates who were larger and more experienced in combat. "Then why did they choose this one?" Kefter asked, though he didn't really care about the answer. "It wouldn't matter who they sent. Unknown, War Master. Perhaps they knew that sending their best would be pointless." Kefter laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through his chambers. "Smart of them. At least they understand their situation." He turned back to the recordings. "Show me more of their combat techniques." The display showed human soldiers in various battles. Kefter watched them use cover, work in teams, and rely heavily on their weapons. They were tactical, he had to admit, but they were still physically inferior to every other species he had faced. "Remember the Zerillian berserkers?" Kefter asked his subordinate. "They could tear through solid steel with their bare hands. Their champion fought for 6 hours before I finally brought him down." "Yes, War Master." "He was the strongest opponent you had faced in 50 years. And the Thakarian war chief? His exoskeleton could deflect plasma fire. His people thought he was invincible." "Until you found the weak point in his armor," Vexahan replied. "Your victory broke their spirit completely." Kefter nodded with satisfaction. In his 400 years of life, he had personally defeated over 60 champions from different worlds. Each victory had been a testament to Vorthek's superiority. This human would be no different, except that he would be the weakest opponent Kefter had ever faced. Meanwhile, aboard the research vessel Meridian, Jake Morrison was having a very different kind of preparation. Instead of practicing combat moves or studying weapons, he was sitting in the ship's library with Dr. Maria Santos, reading everything they could find about the Vorthek. "Look at this," Maria said, pointing to a datapad. "We've been monitoring their communications for 2 days now. They're not even trying to hide their transmissions." Jake leaned over to read the screen. "What does it say?" "They're discussing the combat trial like it's a routine training exercise. Listen to this translation. The human will provide minimal resistance. Estimated combat duration, less than 5 minutes. They're that confident?" Jake asked. "It gets worse," Maria continued. "They've been sharing recordings of your military service with their entire fleet. They're treating it like entertainment." Jake felt a flash of anger, but he pushed it down. Getting emotional wouldn't help him win this fight. "What else have you learned about them?" Maria pulled up another file. "They're incredible fighters. Jake, they're faster than any human, stronger than any human, and they have natural weapons that could cut through steel. Every species they've conquered had some kind of natural advantage, but the Vorthek beat them all." "Tell me about their losses," Jake said. "That's the problem. They don't have any. In 300 years of conquest, they've never lost a single combat trial. Not one." Jake was quiet for a moment. "There has to be something. No one is unbeatable." "I've been thinking about that," Maria said. Every species they've fought has relied on the same basic approach. They send their strongest warrior to fight strength against strength. But what if that's the wrong approach? What do you mean? Maria stood up and walked to the wall display. She pulled up images of various alien species the Vorthik had conquered. Look at these champions. The Xerillian Berserker, the Thokarian War Chief, the Zephyrian Blade Master. They're all the same type of fighter. Jake studied the images. Each alien champion was massive, heavily muscled, and armed with powerful weapons. They all looked like they could tear him apart without effort. They're all trying to out-muscle the Vorthik, Jake realized. They're fighting the Vorthik's kind. A fight. Exactly, Maria said. And that's why they all lost. The Vorthik are the ultimate predators. They've evolved to be the strongest, fastest, most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. You can't beat them at their own game. Jake thought about this. So what's our game? I don't know yet, Maria admitted. But I think the answer is in human evolution. We didn't become the dominant species on Earth because we were the strongest. We became dominant because we were different. Over the next 24 hours, Jake and Maria worked with the entire crew of the Meridian to understand what made humans unique. They studied everything from human physiology to psychology to cultural development. Dr. Lisa Carter joined their research, bringing her expertise in xenobiology. I've been analyzing the Vorthik's combat style, she said. They're ambush predators. They rely on quick, overwhelming attacks to end fights fast. Like a big cat, Jake said. Exactly. They're built for power and speed, but not for endurance. Look at their muscle structure. Lisa showed them detailed scans of Vorthik anatomy. These are fast-twitch muscle fibers. Perfect for explosive movement, but they tire quickly. How quickly? Jake asked. That's hard to say. But based on their body structure, I guess they're not built for long fights. Lieutenant Steve Parker looked up from his computer station. I've been going through historical records of their combat trials. The longest fight on record lasted 43 minutes. Most end in under 10 minutes. Because they're fighting creatures who try to match their strength, Maria said. What if Jake doesn't try to match their strength? What if he tries to outlast them instead? The idea was starting to form in Jake's mind. Humans weren't the strongest species on Earth, but they were persistence hunters. Early humans had hunted by chasing their prey until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. It was a strategy that had worked for thousands of years. I need to see more recordings of Kefter fighting, Jake said. Steve pulled up footage from the Vorthik archives. They watched as Kefter fought champion after champion. Each fight followed the same pattern. A brief period of testing, then overwhelming aggression that ended the battle quickly. He's impatient, Jake observed. He wants to end fights fast. All Vorthik are like that, Lisa said. It's their nature. They're apex predators. They don't understand the concept of a war of attrition. But humans do, Jake said quietly. The crew of the Meridian worked through the night, analyzing every aspect of Vorthik psychology and combat history. They discovered that the Vorthik Empire had grown so powerful because they always fought the same way. Identify the enemy's greatest strength, then prove that Vorthik's strength was superior. They're going to expect you to try to overpower Kefter, Maria said. Every champion they've faced has tried to do that, so I won't, Jake replied. I'll do something they've never seen before. As the time for the combat trial approached, Jake felt a strange sense of calm. He wasn't stronger than Kefter, and he wasn't faster. But he was something the War Master had never encountered before, a human who understood that sometimes the best way to win a fight was not to fight at all, but to make your opponent defeat himself. The Vorthik were about to learn that Earth's champion had been chosen not for his strength, but for his ability to think in ways they had never imagined. They had made their first mistake by judging humans by the standards of every other species they had conquered. It would not be their last mistake. Luna Station had never seen anything like this before. The orbital platform that normally housed scientific research and diplomatic meetings had been transformed into a combat arena. Representatives from dozens of alien civilizations filled the observation decks, all watching to see if humanity would join the long list of species conquered by the Vorthek Empire. Jake Morrison stood in the preparation chamber, looking out at the arena through a thick glass window. The fighting space was circular, about 50 meters across, with a high ceiling and walls made of reinforced metal. Various pieces of equipment and debris were scattered around the floor, apparently placed there to make the combat more interesting. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Lisa Carter asked through the communication system. "Nervous," Jake replied honestly, "but ready." On the other side of the arena, War Master Kethter was making his final preparations. Even from this distance, Jake could see how massive the Vorthek warrior was. Kethter stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scaled body rippling with muscle. He wore traditional Vorthek battle armor that covered his torso and arms, but left his claws and teeth exposed as weapons. "Remember the plan," came Dr. Maria Santos' voice through Jake's earpiece. "Don't try to match his strength. Use your mobility and let him tire himself out." "I know," Jake said. "I just hope this works." Lieutenant Steve Parker's voice joined the conversation from the command center. "Jake, we're monitoring Kethter's vital signs through the arena sensors. His heart rate is steady, his breathing is normal. He's completely relaxed." "Good," Jake said. "That means he's not taking me seriously." The arena's announcement system crackled to life. A neutral voice, translated into dozens of languages, filled the station. "The trial of champions will begin. In 2 minutes, Champion Morrison of Earth, prepare for combat." Jake took a deep breath and walked toward the arena entrance. He wore simple Earth military fatigues and carried no weapons except for a small knife on his belt. Compared to Kethter's impressive armor and natural weapons, Jake looked completely unprepared for battle. "Jake," Lisa's voice came through his earpiece one last time. "Remember what makes you human." The arena doors opened with a loud hiss. Jake stepped onto the combat floor and immediately felt the weight of thousands of alien eyes watching him. The observation decks were packed with representatives from the Galactic Council, all betting on how quickly the human would die. Kethter emerged from the opposite entrance, and the crowd fell silent. The Vorthek warrior moved with the fluid grace of a born predator, his yellow eyes fixed on Jake with the same expression a cat might give a mouse. He carried a traditional Vorthek war blade, a curved weapon that looked like it could cut through steel. "Human," Kethter called out, his voice echoing through the arena. "I am War Master Kethter, destroyer of champions, conqueror of worlds. What is your name so I may honor you before your death?" "Captain Jake Morrison," Jake replied, moving slowly toward the center of the arena. "Earth Defense Corps." Kethter laughed, a harsh sound that made several aliens in the observation deck step back. "Earth Defense Corps? You defend nothing, human. After I kill you, your world will serve the Vorthek Empire forever." "Maybe," Jake said calmly, "but you have to kill me first." The neutral voice announced the start of combat. "Trial of Champions begins now. Combat will continue until one champion yields or dies." Kethter immediately charged forward with devastating speed. His warblade swept through the air where Jake's head had been a split second before, but Jake wasn't there anymore. He had rolled to the side and was already moving toward a piece of metal debris. "Stand and fight, coward," Kethter roared, spinning. To face Jake's new position, Jake didn't respond. He grabbed the piece of metal and threw it at Kethter's head. The Vorthek warrior easily deflected it with his blade, but the action gave Jake time to move again. He was already running toward the far side of the arena. Kethter pursued him with frightening speed. The Vorthok's powerful legs carried him across the arena floor in massive strides. But every time he got close enough to strike, Jake would change direction or duck behind a piece of equipment. "What are you doing, human?" Kefter demanded, frustration beginning to color his voice. "This is not how champions fight." Jake paused behind a large piece of machinery and looked at his opponent. "You're right," he said. "This is how humans fight." The crowd in the observation decks was getting restless. They had come to see a traditional battle between warriors, not this strange game of chase. But Jake wasn't playing a game. He was executing a carefully planned strategy. "Jake, his heart rate is starting to increase," Steve's voice reported through the earpiece. "He's getting annoyed." "Good," Jake whispered back. Kefter charged again, this time with less precision and more raw anger. His warblade crashed into the machinery where Jake had been hiding, cutting through the metal like paper. But Jake had already moved to a new position. "Fight me," Kefter screamed. "Face me like a warrior. I am fighting you," Jake called back. "I'm just not fighting, stupid." This comment made Kefter even angrier. In his culture, warriors faced each other directly and proved their strength through combat. What Jake was doing wasn't cowardly, exactly, but it wasn't honorable either. It was something Kefter had never encountered before. The chase continued. For another 10 minutes. Jake led Kefter around the arena, using every piece of equipment and debris as cover. He threw objects to distract the Vorthok warrior, used the arena's layout to force Kefter to take longer routes, and generally made himself as difficult to catch as possible. "His breathing is getting heavier," Maria reported. "His muscle efficiency is dropping." Jake could see it too. Kefter's movements were still fast, but they weren't as controlled as they had been at the start. The Vorthok warrior was beginning to make small mistakes, overextending his attacks or taking a fraction of a second too long to change direction. "You cannot run forever, human." Kefter snarled, his breathing now clearly labored. "I'm not running," Jake replied, finally stopping behind a large piece of debris near the center of the arena. "I'm thinking." For the first time since the combat began, Jake didn't immediately move when Kefter approached. Instead, he seemed to be studying the Vorthok warrior, watching how he moved and breathed. Kefter raised his warblade, preparing for a killing strike. But as he brought the weapon down, Jake did something unexpected. Instead of dodging away, he stepped forward and to the side, moving inside Kefter's reach. The warblade missed Jake completely, and the human's small knife found a gap in Kefter's armor. Jake didn't try to deliver a killing blow. Instead, he made a small cut on Kefter's arm and immediately backed away. Kefter looked at the cut in disbelief. It was tiny, barely more than a scratch, but it was the first time in over a century that any opponent had actually managed to wound him. "Impossible," Kefter whispered. Jake smiled. "No, just human." The crowd in the observation decks was stunned into silence. The unbeatable War Master had been hurt by a creature that seemed completely outmatched. More importantly, the human had shown that he could attack when he chose to, but preferred to wait for the right moment. Jake, his heart rate just spiked. Steve reported, "He's rattled." Kefter's next attack was wild and uncontrolled. He swung his warblade in wide arcs, trying to cut Jake in half. But the human was no longer where the attacks were aimed. Jake had learned Kefter's patterns, and now he could predict where the Vorthok warrior would strike. "You're getting tired," Jake observed calmly, stepping around another missed attack. "How long has it been since you fought someone for more than 10 minutes? Kefter didn't answer, but his breathing was now clearly labored. Sweat was beginning to show on his scaled skin, and his movements were becoming more desperate and less precise. "This is what persistence hunting looks like," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the arena. "Humans used to chase animals for hours until they collapsed from exhaustion. We're not the fastest or the strongest, but we don't give up. The realization hit Kefter like a physical blow. This wasn't a traditional combat trial. This was something completely different, something his people had never encountered before. The human wasn't trying to overpower him. The human was trying to outlast him. For the first time in 400 years of life, War Master Kefter began to understand what it meant to be afraid. 20 minutes into the combat trial, something impossible was happening on Luna Station. War Master Kefter, the undefeated champion of the Vorthic Empire, was breathing hard. His yellow eyes were no longer cold and confident. Instead, they showed something that no alien in the observation decks had ever seen before. Uncertainty. Jake Morrison moved around the arena like he had all the time in the world. While Kefter's movements had become slower and less precise, Jake seemed to be getting stronger. His breathing was steady, his steps were sure, and his dark eyes never stopped watching his opponent. "This cannot be happening," whispered Ambassador Zekron of the Thokarian Republic. His people had been conquered by the Vorthic 50 years ago. He had watched their greatest war chief fall to Kefter in less than 15 minutes. How is this small creature still fighting? Dr. Lisa Carter was watching from the Earth Command Center, monitoring Jake's vital signs through his suit sensors. "His heart rate is actually decreasing," she reported to Admiral Kate Nelson. "Jake is entering what we call the endurance zone." "Explain that," Nelson said. "Humans have two different energy systems," Lisa explained. "Short bursts of power for immediate threats, and long-term endurance for extended activity. Jake has moved past the initial stress response. His body is now running on the system that allowed our ancestors to hunt animals for hours." On the arena floor, Kefter launched another attack. His warblade swept through the air in a deadly arc, but Jake wasn't where the blade was aimed. The human had learned to read Kefter's body language, predicting each attack before it happened. "Stand still and fight," Kefter roared, frustration making his voice crack. "Why?" Jake asked calmly. "This way is working better." Lieutenant Steve Parker was monitoring communications from the Vorthic fleet. "Jake, we're picking up chatter from their ships. The other Vorthac commanders are getting worried. They've never seen their War Master struggle like this." Jake filed this information away while dodging another wild swing from Kefter's blade. The Vorthac warrior was no longer fighting with the precision and control he had shown at the beginning. His attacks were becoming desperate and predictable. "You fight like a coward," Kefter snarled, pausing to catch his breath. "I fight like a human," Jake replied. "We're not cowards. We're smart." In the observation decks, representatives from dozens of alien civilizations were beginning to whisper among themselves. None of them had ever seen anything like this. The mighty Vorthic War Master was being outfought by a creature that seemed physically inferior in every way. Commander Veltar of the Zerillian survivors leaned forward in his seat. His people had been enslaved by the Vorthic after their berserker champion fell in combat. "The human is doing something our warrior never tried," he said to his aide. "He is making the War Master come to him. But why does that matter?" The aide asked. "Because the War Master is used to quick victories. Look at him. He does not know how to fight a long battle." Veltar was right. Kefter had spent centuries winning fights in the first few minutes of combat. He had never needed to pace himself or conserve energy. His entire fighting style was built around overwhelming opponents before they could adapt to his attacks. Dr. Maria Santos was analyzing the combat from every angle. "Jake, Kefter's attack patterns are breaking down. He's reverting to basic aggression instead of tactical thinking." "I see it," Jake replied quietly, stepping around another clumsy swing. "He's getting frustrated. Use that," Maria advised. Frustrated opponents make mistakes. Jake decided to test this theory. Instead of simply avoiding Kefter's next attack, he deliberately moved closer to the Vorthac warrior. As Kefter blade swept toward him, Jake ducked under it and tapped Kefter on the side with his small knife dot. It wasn't a serious wound, just another small cut that barely broke the skin. But the psychological impact was enormous. Kefter had now been hit twice by an opponent he should have killed in the first minute of combat. "How?" Kefter gasped, staring at the new cut on his arm. "You are weak. You are slow. How are you doing this?" "Because you don't understand what strength really means," Jake said, backing away to a safe distance. "You think strength is about muscles and claws and big weapons. But real strength is about not giving up." The crowd in the observation decks was completely silent now. They were witnessing something that went against everything they thought they knew about combat and power. The physically weaker creature was dominating the physically stronger, one through sheer determination and superior tactics. Commander Rick Hayes was watching from Earth's military headquarters, analyzing every moment of the fight. "This is incredible," he said to his staff. "Jake isn't just fighting Kefter. He's fighting the entire Vorthek philosophy of conquest." "What do you mean?" asked Colonel Ben Foster. "The Vorthek conquer through intimidation. They show up, prove they're stronger than anyone else, and break the spirit of their enemies. But Jake isn't intimidated. He's showing the entire galaxy that the Vorthek can be beaten." Back in the arena, Kefter was beginning to understand the same thing. For the first time in his long life, he was facing an opponent who refused to be impressed by his size, his weapons, or his reputation. The human just kept fighting, adapting, and learning. "This is not how combat works," Kefter said, more to himself than to Jake. "The strong defeat the weak. That is the law of nature." "Maybe that's the law of nature on your world," Jake replied. "But humans learned a long time ago that the biggest predator isn't always the one that survives." Jake was referring to human evolutionary history, but Kefter didn't understand the reference. All the Vorthek knew was that they were the apex predators of the galaxy. They had never encountered a species that survived through intelligence, endurance, and adaptability rather than raw physical power. "Jake, his vital signs are showing severe stress," Dr. Lisa Carter reported. "Heart rate elevated, breathing irregular, signs of muscle fatigue. He's running out of steam. How much longer can he keep this up?" Admiral Nelson asked. "Based on his physiology, maybe 10 more minutes of high-intensity combat. But Jake could probably go for hours if he had to." This was the crucial difference between humans and Vorthek. Kefter's species had evolved as ambush predators, designed for short bursts of devastating violence. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters, capable of maintaining steady effort over long periods of time. Kefter made his next attack with obvious desperation. He charged forward with his war blade held high, putting everything he had left into one final attempt to end the fight. But Jake had been waiting for exactly this moment. Instead of running away, Jake moved toward Kefter. At the last second, he dropped to the ground and rolled between the Vorthek warrior's legs. As he came up behind Kefter, Jake's knife found another gap in the armor, this time leaving a slightly deeper cut on Kefter's back. Kefter spun around, but his movements were now clumsy and uncontrolled. The War Master, who had seemed invincible 30 minutes ago, was now struggling to stay on his feet. "Impossible," Kefter whispered, staring at Jake in disbelief. "You should be dead. You should have fallen in the first minute." "But I didn't," Jake said simply. "That's what makes me human." The revelation hit not just Kefter, but every alien watching the combat. They had all assumed that physical superiority guaranteed victory. They had never considered that there might be other kinds of strength, other ways to win a fight. In the Vorthek fleet, Sub-Commander Vexahan was receiving reports from the arena with growing alarm. "War Master Kefter is struggling," he reported to the other ship commanders. "The human has wounded him 3 times. "That is impossible," replied Commander Morketh. "No champion has ever wounded the War Master." Perhaps we underestimated this species, Vexahan said quietly. It was the first time in Vorthok history that any of their leaders had admitted to underestimating an opponent. But as they watched their greatest warrior being slowly worn down by a creature they had dismissed as weak, they began to realize that they might have made a terrible mistake. Jake Morrison wasn't just fighting for Earth's freedom. He was proving that the Vorthok Empire's entire understanding of power and conquest was wrong. And with each passing minute, that proof became harder to deny. 35 minutes into the combat trial, War Master Kefter made his final and most fatal mistake. Abandoning all strategy and tactical thinking, he let pure rage take control. The undefeated champion of the Vorthok Empire raised his warblade above his head and screamed a battle cry that echoed through Luna Station. "I will not be defeated by a weak human." Kefter roared, charging forward with the last of his strength. Jake Morrison had been waiting for this moment. Throughout the entire fight, he had been patient, studying his opponent, learning Kefter's patterns. Now as the massive Vorthok warrior bore down on him with reckless abandon, Jake saw exactly what he needed to see. Kefter's charge was powerful but completely predictable. The War Master had put everything into this final attack, leaving himself no backup plan and no way to change direction. Jake waited until the last possible second, then stepped aside with the calm precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Kefter. Momentum carried him past Jake and straight into the arena wall. The impact was tremendous. The Vorthok warrior hit the reinforced metal with enough force to dent it, and his warblade flew from his hands, clattering across the arena floor. For a moment, Kefter lay stunned against the wall. When he tried to stand, his legs shook and nearly gave out beneath him. The mighty War Master who had conquered 300 worlds was exhausted, wounded, and disarmed. Jake picked up the fallen warblade. The weapon was heavy, designed for someone with Kefter's massive strength. But Jake lifted it anyway, pointing the tip at Kefter's throat. The arena fell completely silent. Every alien in the observation decks held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. In every previous combat trial, this was the moment when the Vorthok champion delivered the killing blow that sealed another world's fate. Do it. Kefter gasped, looking up at Jake with yellow eyes that no longer held any confidence. Kill me and claim your victory. Jake looked down at the defeated War Master for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked every creature watching the trial. He lowered the warblade and stepped back. "No," Jake said simply. "What?" Kefter struggled to understand what he was hearing. "You must kill me. That is how combat trials end." "Maybe that's how Vorthok combat trials end," Jake replied. "But I'm human. We do things differently." Jake walked over to where Kefter's communication device had fallen during the fight. He picked it up and activated it, knowing his words would be broadcast to the entire Vorthok fleet. "My name is Captain Jake Morrison of Earth," he said clearly. "I have defeated your War Master in fair combat. According to your own laws, Earth is free from conquest. But I want you to understand something important. In the command centers of 57 Vorthok warships, alien commanders listened in stunned silence. They had never heard a conquered champion speak to them before, because no conquered champion had ever survived their trial. "I didn't beat Kefter because I was stronger than him," Jake continued. "I beat him because I understood something he didn't. Real strength isn't about being the biggest or the most dangerous. Real strength is about refusing to give up, even when everything seems hopeless." Sub-Commander Vexahan was receiving reports from all across the Vorthok fleet. Ship after ship reported the same thing. Their crews were confused, uncertain, and shaken by what they had witnessed. "The War Master has been defeated," Vexahan reported to the fleet commanders. "But the human, he spared Kefter's life." "That makes no sense," replied Commander Morketh. "Why would he show mercy to an enemy?" I do not know, Vexahan admitted. Nothing about this combat trial has made sense. On Luna Station, Jake was helping Kefter to his feet. The Vorthak warrior was still struggling to understand what had happened to him. You could have killed me, Kefter said. Why didn't you? Because killing you wouldn't prove anything, Jake explained. You're not evil, Kefter. You're just wrong about what makes someone strong. I do not understand. Jake gestured toward the observation decks where representatives from dozens of alien civilizations were watching. Look around you. Every species the Vorthak have conquered. You beat their strongest warrior and thought that meant you had beaten their people. But strength isn't just about one person. Then what is it about? It's about all of us working together. It's about not giving up when things get hard. It's about finding ways to solve problems instead of just fighting them. Dr. Lisa Carter was monitoring the conversation from the Earth Command Center. Jake, the entire galactic community is watching this. What you say here could change everything. Jake nodded, knowing that his next words would be heard across the galaxy. The Vorthak Empire has spent centuries proving they're the strongest predators in the galaxy. But being a predator isn't the only way to survive. Sometimes the species that survives isn't the one that's best at fighting. Sometimes it's the one that's best at adapting. Admiral Kate Nelson was coordinating Earth's response from the Defense Headquarters. She opened a communication channel. To Jake. Captain Morrison, the Vorthak fleet is still in position around Earth. What are your orders? Jake looked at Kefter, then at the communication device that was broadcasting his words to the alien fleet. War Master Kefter, you offered Earth a choice. Submit to the Vorthak Empire or be destroyed. Now I'm offering you a choice. What choice? Kefter asked weakly. You can keep trying to conquer the galaxy through fear and violence. But now, everyone knows that you can be beaten. Word of this fight will spread to every world you've conquered. Your own people will start to question whether the Vorthak way is really the best way. Jake paused, letting this sink in. Or you can try something different. Instead of conquering worlds, maybe you could try working with them. Instead of proving you're the strongest, maybe you could try proving you're the wisest. The suggestion was so alien to Vorthak thinking that Kefter actually stumbled backward. You want us to cooperate with inferior species? They're not inferior, Jake said firmly. They're just different. Every species has something valuable to offer. Humans learned that a long time ago. Lieutenant Steve Parker was monitoring communications from across the galaxy. Jake, we're getting reports from Vorthak-controlled worlds. Word of the combat trial is spreading fast. Some of the conquered species are starting to organize resistance movements. Commander Rick Hayes added his analysis from Earth's military center. The Vorthak Empire is built on the idea that they're unbeatable. Jake has just proven that's not true. Their entire power structure is going to collapse. Jake understood the implications of what was happening. By defeating Kefter without killing him, by showing mercy to an enemy, he had done more than just free Earth. He had started a revolution in how the galaxy thought about strength and power. Kefter, Jake said, offering his hand to help the Vorthak warriors stand fully upright. Your people are great fighters. But fighting isn't the only skill that matters. If the Vorthak worked with other species instead of conquering them, imagine what you could accomplish. Kefter stared at Jake's outstretched hand for a long moment. In Vorthak culture, showing weakness was the worst possible thing a warrior could do. But Jake had just shown that mercy could be a form of strength. Slowly, carefully, Kefter reached out and took Jake's hand. The gesture was seen by every alien in the observation decks, transmitted to every ship in the Vorthak fleet, and broadcast to every world in the galaxy. The undefeated war master of the Vorthak Empire was accepting help from the human who had beaten him. This is impossible, whispered Ambassador Zekron of the Thakarian Republic. The Vorthak do not show mercy. They do not accept help from others. Maybe. They're learning, replied Commander Veltar of the Zerillian survivors. Maybe this human has taught them something new. Over the following hours, the Vorthak fleet slowly withdrew from Earth space, but they didn't leave to find another world to conquer. Instead, they returned to their home territory to begin the difficult process of reorganizing their entire civilization. Jake Morrison returned to Earth as the human who had saved his world. But more than that, he had shown the galaxy that there were different ways to be strong. The Vorthak Empire's reign of terror was over, not because they had been destroyed, but because they had been shown a better way to live. The galaxy's apex predators had made one fatal mistake. They had chosen to fight a human who understood that. The greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from turning them into friends.